Well, staying with EDIPAC, in an exclusive interview earlier, we spoke to Ernest Moniz. He's the former U.S. Energy Secretary and now the CEO and president of the Energy Futures Initiatives. And he tells us about the challenges and complications in the transition to renewable energy.
Well, first of all, let me say that, of course, renewables will be a key part of the decarbonizing solution. And tripling is also a target really for the U.S. Biden administration. However, I want to emphasize that it's really about keeping carbon out of the atmosphere. So there are some other approaches like capturing carbon dioxide after combustion and burying it, like nuclear power, like capturing carbon out of the air and the oceans. And these are all areas where the oil and gas companies really have the skill sets and the workers to be able to manage those. So what I want to emphasize is that the oil and gas companies are moving out on renewables. They are moving out on hydrogen, but they also have really a leg up on important areas like carbon capture and those kinds of technologies.
We definitely want to talk more about carbon capture and also nuclear power potentially later in the conversation. But let's focus a bit more on the theme for this year's EDIPAC gathering. It's decarbonizing faster together. What do you see as some of the biggest obstacles to decarbonization efforts right now? And what needs to be done to accelerate this?
Well, first of all, the challenge of decarbonization is immense for everyone. We are talking about trying to get to net zero emissions by 2050. That's only 25 years away, roughly, which in the energy industry would require unprecedented pace of change. So that's a fact for all of us. And I'll say, for example, if I take the United States, we need to triple our renewables, as was already stated. And we can do that in principle. However, in the United States and in other parts of the world, the infrastructure may be the pacing item. For example, in the United States, we have 2,000 gigawatts of capacity waiting to get connected to the grid. And as we know, those projects take 5 years, 7 years, 8 years. If we don't move that up to 2 or 3 years, we will not make it. I think in the end, the infrastructure, whether it's wires or pipes, given public resistance often to those projects, that actually, to me, is the pacing item for us to decarbonize.
And infrastructure is not the only challenge facing the U.S. right now. The U.S. budget battle is also further highlighting how the Democrats and Republicans agree on very little. Yet at the same time, Americans are also seeing the effects of global warming with wildfires, record heat, and also flash floods. How would you explain the state of play in the U.S. when it comes to confronting the climate crisis?
Well, first of all, the point you made about extreme weather is extremely important. And in fact, a brand new poll shows that 64% of Americans now associate extreme weather with the warming climate. To me, this is the harbinger. As that number keeps creeping up further, that will be the harbinger for a political shift, the kind of shift we need for national policy. So the politics right now, as you say, is rather poisonous. And unfortunately, it has spilled over into the climate discussion. However, let me say on the bright side that there was bipartisan passage of 2 pieces of legislation, the infrastructure law, called the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, and the so-called CHIPS and Science Act, which passed in bipartisan fashion. The Inflation Reduction Act, which many would say is the most aggressive and ambitious climate approach, that did pass, unfortunately, in a partisan way. But the reality is it has stability as well. It's in law, and the Treasury Department is writing the rules for those tax incentives to be used. So fundamentally, I think that there is sufficient bipartisan support on the technology front. And I believe in this decade, we will make continued progress in clean energy technology. Where the problem comes is in policy. in regulation. That's going way too slowly. But as I said, the extreme weather is actually providing. I don't want to say that I'm in favor of extreme weather, but it's a reality, and it is in fact going to be the political tipping point. I believe sometime later in this decade, for the United States to move across the board on decarbonization.